George, always appreciate your time. I guess I'll just start with what's the NFLPA's official position on this letter from Adolfo Birch and the NFL?
Good morning to you, Ross. And I wish we were both at Copacabana Beach with Dan at the moment. But, certainly we were a little bit taken aback with the tone of that letter. Certainly there are areas that we can choose to disagree with the league. We have a lot of respect for the game. Our players have a lot of respect for what they do as professionals. But, I think that letter in particular crossed the line of what is professional conduct as it relates to dealing with your players. And, we've always taken the position that the NFL needs to step up and provide any evidence that they have beyond just a report that has now been recanted or was immediately recanted. And they haven't done that yet. So for them to make a mountain out of this molehill is unfortunate and it's disappointing. But ultimately, it's our job to represent our players, and that's what we'll do.
So, George, just for the people that are just hopping in on this thing, basically, the NFLPA agrees that if there's credible evidence in terms of a violation, then their players should sit for the interview. You're saying, and the players have contended, that there is not credible evidence, whereas the league is saying, in their opinion, there is credible evidence. Is that really what this is coming down to?
I think that's a pretty good explanation. So when the report first came out, I guess it was in December, there were all these names dropped in that report. And, the most notable one, obviously, was Peyton Manning. These four players were named in some way by a gentleman named Charlie Sly. As soon as that report was public, he came out and recanted everything. And the NFL has contended that based on that sole piece of evidence, as far as we know, that the players need to submit to not only an investigation, but an interview and all sorts of other things. We don't believe that is outlined in the CBA. Now, ultimately, when you are in a position like we are now, we're going to support the players in whatever they decide to do. They can, it's always been their choice as to whether or not to proceed with the interviews or not. The union's going to represent them. If they decide to move forward, the union will be there. If they decide to not sit down for the interview, the union will be there for them as well.
But what advice are you giving them, George?
Well, like everything else. So in any other situation that we've gone through over the last 6 or 7 years, these are your rights. These are the decisions that you have to choose from, and these are the consequences for each and risks for each of those decisions. So, again, we've talked about the rights. We don't believe that the league has a right to impose the players coming in for an interview based on nothing. That is clear, and we certainly don't think they have any right to impose discipline based on what's out there. There is nothing out there. But obviously the risks to and the consequences to them denying that, if you take the league at their word, is that they'll be suspended indefinitely and miss games, which will obviously lead to another fight of some sort down the road. We don't want to be in that position. I certainly hope the league doesn't want to be in that position. It's disappointing that we're on the eve of another great NFL season, and the headlines are not about what's happening on the field, but what's happening off the field.
Is the NFLPA and the NFL in talks to try to work something out here?
That's a great question. We would love to have been in discussions to try to have this thing resolved months ago. That has not been the case. Look, Ross, this is not our first go-around with this regime in the league office. They did the same exact thing, if you remember, in Bounty. They did the same exact thing when they violated the CBA with Ray Rice. Now, clearly they happen to have gotten a couple of court cases go in their favor recently, but that doesn't mean that the law is a good substitute for professionalism and a level of behavior that is deemed, to respect the players of the National Football League. That's just who they are. This is what the job is, and we will stand up for our players no matter what.
George, refresh my memory. Has there been players suspended for not cooperating or not talking? I know Favre got, fined $50,000 or something for not cooperating. Is there any precedent for guys to be suspended and miss football games for not agreeing to talk to the league?
No, there is no precedent for such a thing. And, Saints fans know all too well what happened to their franchise. Obviously, Patriots fans are still mad, and I think we'll always be mad about, the fact that Tom's going to miss the first 4 games of this season. And now Packers fans and Steeler fans are getting a taste of, when you have a league office that doesn't kind of respect the rules of engagement, this is what happens. So there isn't a precedent for that. We certainly don't think that this is the right thing to do. But we will do what we have to do, given what the players decide here in the next couple of days.
Talking with George Atallah, the NFLPA's Assistant Executive Director of External Affairs here on the Dan Patrick Show. George, based on the NFL exonerating Peyton Manning, they clearly are saying that they don't believe Charlie Sly to be credible, yet they still want to interview these guys. So are they just doing this because they can? I mean, is this just kind of a power play? Let's say they have to interview or we'll suspend them because we can. Because they can't be that concerned about these guys actually taking PEDs because they just exonerated Peyton.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that is what logic and reason would dictate, that you have no evidence, you have not produced any evidence, and you've just exonerated Peyton for arguably, who was a more notable subject of the documentary than any of the 4 players that we're talking about. So logic and reason does not usually dictate the behavior of the league office. Oftentimes, again, we would much rather be in a world where we're talking about the issues that are about to happen on the field. For as much as people don't like the preseason, there's a lot to like about young players getting a chance and teams trying to rebuild and all of the things that you want to talk about heading into the football season. This is not high on our list of things to discuss, but here we are.
So 2 questions if the players decide they're not going to interview. I guess number 1 would be, what does the NFLPA do then? Do you file some sort of legal injunction or something that I'm glad I didn't go to law school for? Or do you pay the players money? Do you pay the players money that they're missing out on if they're suspended?
Well, there are certainly legal options if the players decide that they do not want to sit down for the interview. Ross, you and I have talked a number of times. I'm not a lawyer. We have a very capable internal and external legal counsel whose job it is to worry about those things. I think there are certainly recourses that we can take to protect their rights if they don't want to do that. Again, our advice to the players has always been, these are your rights. Know what they are. You do not have to sit down for this because the drug policies do not call for a submission of interviews if there isn't any credible evidence. And if you decide to go through with it, great. If you decide not to, we're always up for a fight.
Last question, George, and this one's totally off topic, but we're going to talk about Marcell Dareus a little bit and his suspension. Okay. Does the NFLPA have an official position on marijuana testing in the league?
Yeah, the official position is that we have a collectively bargained drug policy that still maintains it's a banned substance. Certainly we made some progressive changes in 2014 when we signed the new drug policies that elevated the number of nanograms and offenses that you needed in order to get suspended. But our focus as a union is more on the medical usage and the scientific usage going forward. How can we treat that substance?
I think we might have just lost. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I said, how can we treat that substance as potentially one that deals with the pain management issue that our players go through? I think that's where our union is going to be from this point forward. But every player knows that they have to adhere to the program pretty strictly. And, that's where we are.
George, really appreciate the time. Thanks for coming aboard this morning.
My pleasure, and hope to talk to you soon.
There he is, George Atallah.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.